It's 8:24 now. How many of us would step in to help if we saw someone having a medical episode? Well, a Wiltshire teenager did just that when she came to the aid of a woman having a violent epileptic seizure on a train. You might be surprised to hear that 17-year-old Kaylee Miller from Devizes is in a wheelchair, yet she was the only person in the carriage to get involved. Delighted to say, Kaylee joins us now. Kaylee, good morning.
Good morning.
Hero? Or just doing a nice, pleasant thing for somebody?
I'm doing what anyone else would have done, surely.
Tell us what happened then. Where was it? When was it?
It was a bit of an odd experience, really, because about a week before, I had a lady on a train who was feeling like she could have had an epileptic seizure. So I went back and looked on my notes on what I'd learned from the WizKids camp I'd been on recently and found out that actually the best thing to do in an epileptic seizure is to put things around her head to stop her head being banged, and also just comfort her until, because you can still hear what's going on during a seizure.
Okay.
So we were on the train. I was heading back from college. I think it was a Tuesday. Don't quote me on that. But I was on the train and a lady fell in front of me and started having a seizure. Quite violent, but not majorly, and no one knew what to do. Everyone was kind of stunned and just stopped, and it's not that they didn't want to help, it's that they didn't know how to help.
So this wasn't a case of just, staring out the window at the beautiful countryside and ignoring the fact that there was a woman in distress? No,
of course, people notice, but they kind of wait for the first move and they don't know what to do. So I jumped out of my chair onto the floor, and I've asked to borrow people's coats and put them round her head to stop her head being banged, because obviously the floors are quite hard on trains, and just comforted her till she came out of it.
And presumably people seeing that for the first time, you jumping out of your chair, that must have been a bit of a shock as well, I'd imagine.
Well, I think once I'd made the first move, people knew what I was doing and they were willing to help. So they might have been a bit shocked, but also then it kind of shocked them into the point where they started to be proactive. So
she came round, she was okay, the person, yeah?
Yeah, the lady was fine. It lasted about 50 seconds in the end. I timed, but she said that because I comforted her, because she could still hear what was going on, it was really nice, because you wouldn't normally get that in a lot of situations. And
physically for you, how demanding was that? I mean, is that something that you are forced to do, but time after time, or not?
No. I don't think it was physically demanding, but I think I would have felt guilty if I had just sat there and watched, knowing that I'd been first aid trained. So I just wanted to help. That was the first thing I wanted to do, so I jumped out of my chair because I knew that she was on the floor, so I had to be at her level.
Now, this isn't the first time, if you're listening at home thinking, Kaylee Miller. I know that name, because trains form a sort of narrative in your life. You were campaigning for changes to trains here on BBC Wiltshire back in February, weren't you?
Well, I don't think that's ended yet. It's still an ongoing procedure, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from me again.
You were victorious in a campaign in the first instance anyway to convince rail operators to get more staff to help disabled passengers, weren't you?
I was, and I'm hoping that I can continue that in the sense that more training is to be done in the future.
OK, so that's certainly not finished yet.
Oh, of course not. It never is.
It's a work in progress. Thanks ever so much, Kaylee.
Thank you.
Good on you. Thanks ever so much. Kaylee Miller, 17 from Devizes.
Anna Correndon's back with full details on these stories and the rest of today's news at 5 o'clock. First, a question for you to ponder for a moment. How many of us would step in to help if we saw someone needing medical help? Would you? Would you know what to do? Well, one Wiltshire teenager did exactly that when she came to the aid of a woman who was having a violent epileptic seizure on a train. However, here's the surprising bit. It's 17-year-old Kaylee Miller from Devizes, and Kaylee is in a wheelchair. Yet despite that, she was the only person in the carriage on that train to actually get involved and try to help. And she's been explaining to BBC Wiltshire what happened.
It was a bit of an odd experience, really, because about a week before, I had a lady on a train who was feeling like she could have had an epileptic seizure. So I went back and looked on my notes on what I'd learned from the WizKids camp I'd been on recently, and found out that actually the best thing to do in an epileptic seizure is to put things around her head to stop her head being banged, and also just comfort her until, because you can still hear what's going on during a seizure.
Okay.
So we were on the train. I was heading back from college. I was on the train and a lady fell in front of me and started having a seizure. Quite violent, but not majorly, and no one knew what to do. Everyone was kind of stunned and just stopped, and it's not that they didn't want to help, it's that they didn't know how to help.
So this wasn't a case of just, staring out the window at the beautiful countryside and ignoring the fact that there was a woman in distress?
No, of course people notice, but they kind of wait for the first move and they don't know what to do. So I jumped out of my chair onto the floor. I asked to borrow people's coats and put them round her head to stop her head being banged, because obviously the floors are quite hard on trains, and just comforted her till she came out of it.
What an amazing young lady. Kaylee Miller speaking to Ben Prater on our breakfast show this morning. You may have heard Kaylee mentioning the disabled children's charity WizKids. Well, Tim Dowan is their regional services coordinator. He's on the line to us this afternoon. Tim, you were just listening there to what Kaylee was saying about what she did. How do you react to a story like that?
I think it's brilliant that Kaylee took action. I'm really pleased that Kaylee took the opportunity to use the skills that she learned during our first aid project and support someone who's obviously in need of help. I think it's a big thing to do and a very difficult thing to do. And as Kaylee said, lots of people kind of standing around not sure how to react, and it's fantastic that Kaylee had the skills, the knowledge and the confidence to get involved and support this woman who's obviously in quite a lot of distress.
Well, just remind us how Kaylee knew what to do.
I've been running a partnership project alongside the British Red Cross, and it's called Be a First Aid Whiz, and the project is all about getting young disabled people trained in delivering everyday first aid, and also a core group of young people, one of which is Kaylee, also learning how to train other young disabled people how to deliver first aid. So alongside being trained in delivery of first aid, Kaylee's actually also trained how to train other young people to deliver first aid. And that's been a fantastic project that's taken place over the last year, and it culminated recently in a 2-day residential training event at Trelaw College, where the young people worked with young people from the Red Cross, with our young people who are all disabled, and polished off their skills and gained an accredited certificate in first aid and also in peer education. So it's been a fantastic project.
It really has, hasn't it? I mean, put a figure on it for us. How many people do you think have benefited from this partnership between WizKids and the Red Cross?
Well, it's really difficult. I can tell you that somewhere in the region of 250 to 260 young people have received everyday first aid training.
That's brilliant.
And of those, there's a core group of 6 young people that have gone on to become, able to train other young people. But I also think that in a way, all disabled people have benefited, because this project, as Kaylee so aptly demonstrated, has kind of helped challenge people's perceptions of disabled people's abilities, and also has been a really positive challenge for Kaylee herself and the other young people involved.
And look, as the coordinator, how does it make you feel that Kaylee's skills have been put to good use so very soon?
Well, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't wish anybody to suffer such a distressing thing as an epileptic seizure on a train, but I am full of admiration and pride for Kaylee being able to take action, and I'm just so pleased that the skills that she's learned have been able to be put into practical use in such a positive and from my perspective, inspirational way. She's quite a special young woman.
Clearly, absolutely clearly. Kaylee Miller from Devices. Tim, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Tim Dowan is Regional Services Coordinator for that children's charity, WizKids. So just coming up to 8 minutes to 5.